本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It's April 21st, 2023, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 560. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I'm joined by Ricardo Contreras.
Happy 420, everyone. To say late. God damn it. Fuck.
It's all right. I mean, in your heart, here now
Yeah.
is for
Is
like
420.
it is like it lingers, right? I mean, that's kind of the definition of it.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not cool Renata, but I do have her energy in my heart.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Also, now that is it actually finally happening? Are the blue check marks actually finally going away?
I still got mine.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
I think all the Twitter servers blew up in the fucking rocket.
Musk is thinking of a suitably epic way to make the checks go away, like something that's really like funny and witty.
He's gonna replace.
So here's actually
he's gonna
someone
replace,
came up with the funny and witty, which is like, what if they're not? He claims they went away, but you just will.
Is that anything?
You'll just never know.
Sorry. Can I get that again, Rob?
Cuck mark.
No. No.
Well, I guess that already exists. It's the paid check.
Well, that's what I mean. So like that was the pitch. Was like,
fun.
what if you just give
Rob?
everyone with the existing check mark the cuck mark, and so you will just never know. Did this person pay or not? And you have to live with the stain of, well, you can have the cuck mark, but, you know, have you truly been cucked?
I hate this.
You already heard him. You heard that was Patrick Klepek. You heard cool Renata Price.
Not cool Renata right now.
not yet.
Uncool.
Uncouth.
Standard
even.
Renata.
Do you have to pay $8 a month to unlock cool Renata Price?
So, Patrick, I think I've seen you have been playing a little bit of Everspace too this week. We all got a tiny bit of Everspace fever.
I have. Let me check my notes. I've written down 2 words. Fuck and yeah. Are these notes I've written down about Everspace 2? I have some qualms. We'll get there. But broadly speaking, I think Everspace
right?
2 is a little bit of fuck and a little bit of yeah.
Kato, have you partaken?
A very small amount because I spent too long trying to remap the buttons on my controller.
So
hey, what's up? What's good?
What's good?
Friends?
Yeah, what's good?
Hey. When I said I had some qualms, do we just want to start there? We established the fuck yeah part. Can we get to the other stuff?
I will say, I think
curious.
there was a moment. I fired this game up last Friday. I had the whole like afternoon. I could play games. It was like the schedule was open to just like dig into some games. And there's a moment I was like, had my little gamepad, and I was like, I can just play the game like this. And then I fucked up so bad.
What'd you do?
I went into the control. I went into the settings menu. And I saw the control schemes. There's 2 things that like one thing caught my eye right away, which is it supports Track IR, which is like Track IR is the head tracking thing where there's an infrared camera, and you put like you wear a little like you can just wear a baseball cap. You put a little thing on the bill that has like 3 reference points that the camera will track, and it tracks head movement. Really
VR without an entire headset, but you get that like that actual like head tracking stuff without putting the lenses on your face.
Right, and like really useful for like racing games, almost mandatory for flight sims, because like there's points where you need to be able to like check different visual references without like fussing with the whole interface. But so when Track IR support comes up, it's oftentimes a little bit of a like code that the developer is also kind of opening the door here to like the sim weirdos, and maybe you should like regard the game in that way. And then I see that it has like joystick and throttle support, and I was like, well,
You looked
hold
right
on.
behind you at your
Yeah.
your museum of accessories. Welcome to the Museum of Accessories.
Hello, old friends.
Is joystick and throttle the preferred nomenclature these days? I thought HOTAS.
Yeah.
Please be respectful, Rob.
So Couple things though.
Canceling Rob for calling it a joystick and throttle.
So there's actually two things with this HOTAS setup. It's the SciTech X55. It's a few years old, but more importantly, it is SciTech was a really good peripheral company that got acquired by Mad Catz. Oh. And yes, one can imagine what happens in a Mad Catz acquisition, but they largely let SciTech exist as an independent brand. And then Mad Catz kind of went, and Logitech picked up the entire thing. Picked up everything.
They bought Mad Catz as well?
I think that might be how that'll play out.
I mean, it sort of on some level makes sense. I feel like the heyday of the accessory is behind us, and so I guess I'm not shocked. I haven't tracked. I feel like the last time I thought about Mad Catz was like when you were really low on the E3 meeting assignments list. Like, yeah, you weren't going to see the new Zelda. You're not seeing the new Halo. Do you want to take the Mad Catz appointment, right up, take some photos of some accessories and upload those to a gallery? Yeah, that's what I did as an intern.
So Mad Catz went bankrupt.
All right.
Hey, it happens to great companies.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a little bankruptcy. Do not think a company can be like that. Bankruptcy and being a reputable brand are not compatible. Because I assure
that's
you,
America. That's just about getting your financial house in order through a process that's just been tainted by a little bit of where's the money?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Don't got it.
Sometimes people talk about bankruptcy like bad thing, but I've been hearing from some people recently that bankruptcy may be good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to discharge debts. And who doesn't love to discharge debts? Not by paying them.
I don't like that phrasing. I'm just out here discharging my debts.
So Mad Catz went into administration, but in that Logitech picked up SciTech out of the portfolio.
Cheap asset.
So, but the problem is now that's two layers of acquisitions for SciTech stuff. So SciTech, drivers, software, all of this fallen into the legacy pit.
Where's this in the conversation pit? Do we talk about our legacy accessories? Is that what we're discussing this week?
I couldn't find the drivers for the for the stick and throttle, and they're also supposed to have a profiling software that allows you to, for games that maybe don't totally support which is a lot. There's so many different peripherals. Not every game is going to say specific. It's oh, I know exactly what controller you're using. So profiler software is helpful, for making sort of brute forcing different commands onto a peripheral, so that when you press a button, it'll register as the keystrokes to make the thing happen correctly in game. Can't find that software either. And the drivers predate Windows 11. And no, there won't be any Windows 11 drivers coming for this. There's a lot of people online. There's now limitations on what is a pretty good and rugged, set of controllers. But it's just, it's kind of vestigial. And nothing has really stepped up to take its place. Because the thing about SciTech was, they hit sort of the mid-market price point where this setup was $150. If you look at the high-end sim enthusiast stuff, which is the next step up, you're looking at $300 just for the joystick and another $300 for the throttle. That's the world you enter, and it goes up from there. Anyway, so I found the FTP server where they keep the drivers. This is now just shared around various, the old Sidewinder.
Hell yeah!
Oh god, I miss my old Sidewinder.
That's the last one. I had that and the gamepad. Those are some of my first accessories.
Logitech Wingman, before the redesign, where they made it much more generic, where they had a beautifully sculpted and contoured joystick. It was such a perfect controller. The problem was it was not ambidextrous. And when I believe they did make a left-handed version, but you can imagine why eventually as the sim market did not become as relevant to the future of PC gaming, Logitech was like, we just need one size fits all. Anyway, I missed that thing like crazy. So I finally get this thing working-ish, like no profiler software, but at least Windows 11 can see what I have. The buttons are all registering correctly. All good. Go into the game, and it supports the throttle and stick, but it doesn't have like any sort of logical presets for it at all. So I'm like, well, I gotta just remap this thing.
Right.
And then I ran into, I suspect, the issue you ran into as well, Kato. As far as this game is concerned, there's like 4 different sets of controls that exist in this game that all have their own control schemes that use some of the same buttons, but depending on like contextually where you are, they'll do different things. You'll be in different menus. You'll be like the menu you pull up when you're scanning another ship is different than the menu controls when you are like in the pause menu. And so it's like 5 or 6 pages of controls that you are now mapping.
There's also like, there's like different controls for analog control of something. Like if you want to put it on a stick versus like, I want to move this to a button. And like now there's like a different category that falls under.
You want it on an axis or you want it on a button?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, well.
I mean, sure. And then, I like started remapping. I was like, sure. I don't like I want roll to be on shoulder buttons. That's just how my brain space works,
dude,
honestly.
So the way this game presents roll, which is not in the hours I've spent since like explicitly required to play, but it's part of the aesthetic and like what you want to do 100%. In these games. And roll on a gamepad. And I thought about using keyboard and mouse, but one of the reasons I use gamepad a lot on my PC is if I have to go back to my office, I want some distance from my fucking monitor. And I don't want to be in the position that I was in all day when I was working. And so I like being able to like sit back and like recline, and that's like a huge appeal of the gamepad. And plus this game felt like it's arcadey enough that it should be I shouldn't be losing very much. But the way this game maps roll is, and I could not accomplish it in the tutorial. Like I managed to do it by accident twice just so the game is like, yeah, okay, like can we just move on to the next thing? Is like, it wants you to click the right stick, and then push in a direction. Yeah. Which is, Kato, a couple times recently we have talked about finger feel on games in the context of infinite guitars and like and rhythm games where it's like if you can map it right on like the way your thumb or other buttons move along a gamepad can feel like actually physically satisfying. Yeah. This is like on the other end of that. Like pushing in a stick and attempting to roll it is one of the most profound. I feel like I'm taking years off of this gamepad's life. Like a button it's not supposed to be pushed in this way, and then I can't even do what it's asking. I was like, I can't roll on command, so. It you start rolling, and then at some point, whatever like click pressure you had on it like goes away because you're tilting, and it just stops rolling like mid roll all of a sudden.
Sorry. I have a key question for all of you. Did none of you try the default keyboard and mouse controls?
No, we're talking about different. We want to use gamepads and HOTAS.
Look.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm just fascinated that not a single other person on this call was like, you know what? Let me try the default controls and see how those feel.
This game is being ported to consoles. Like it is saying like gamepad good.
Also specifically,
I was just curious.
Specifically, drive like space, planes, whatever. I want a little stick to pull back on. Like I can't. My brain doesn't want to do the thing on like WASD. Like that's not how flying things go.
To your question, I did, but we'll come back to what happened, why I can't use it.
So the concluding arc of this gamepad thing is I have had it kicking around for a while. Like Microsoft at some point sent me like the most recent Elite controller, and the first thing I did was take off the little dinkuses that go on the back, right? Like the little tabs.
Yeah, but you can use those.
So, and I understand their use, right? Like, which is like in shooters, like load. Like, I get it. I understand why they exist. I do not play games that require that level of controller complexity, and they feel weird to have there if I'm not going to use them, which is why they're super easy to take out. It's like remarkable how easy it is to take this out and put it back in. It's, if you've never done it, it has a good feel. Like, it's satisfying just to put it in and take it out.
It's got a good click.
But when I thought to myself, I was like, oh, okay, maybe what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab that Elite out of my desk. It was connected to my Xbox, connected to the PC. What if I can put this in the back and the roll can be on two of those? My fingers land there very nicely.
Sure.
And so I can keep the existing controls. Maybe I do what Kata was talking about, where like I'm doing the vertical movement, the up and down. Maybe I map that on the upper buttons. But there's not an easy way with the existing controller setup to just put roll somewhere else elegantly. You have to remove something or add a layer of complexity
Patrick,
to the
I'm
buttons.
really curious. Did it recognize those backside buttons?
No,
as
it
not
does not
AB?
recognize them as an extra button. It is.
This is the curse of it. Is such a cool feature, but it doesn't even. Not every Xbox game even does that.
Yeah.
There's some that recognize it as like, okay, you want this map to specifically that lever on the back,
right?
And I'm like, great, thank you. Yes, exactly.
And that's what I wanted.
But for the most part,
but a lot of games, it's like that's just a better way to hit, X, Y, A, B. And I'm like, that's not what I want.
And I guess I haven't gone down this rabbit hole. There are some people have said in the actual, there is like separate Xbox software where you can map it, make a profile that in theory it should recognize the tabs and then the game. But that's not. Basically, it's fussy and it may not work. So I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet, because that would be the 100% ideal setup. Is that I've since given up on rolling, and the game is fine, and I'm having a great time, and it works just fine on the controller. But I cannot help but miss it a little bit, where there's like, this wouldn't save me from getting shot, but damn, it would look kind of cool, and I missed it. I just
you're
can't.
Spinning while you're
Yes, I'm not gonna dodge the missile any better, but boy, I would feel cooler doing it.
Yeah.
And because like in the Descent-y sort of stuff where, you're moving back into a space, like, the game has an auto leveling feature where it's kind of like managing like how it's like, it's fine. It's missing that one last thing that I can't tell. I spent like 90 minutes fussing with this part of it. And I was like, I could have spent 90 minutes shooting shit instead. And instead I'm trying to figure out how to roll. Rob, you said you had something. Take us back to your journey.
So, a visual aid is probably helpful at this point.
Are we in Congress? You putting up a little,
So, I start mapping the controls.
Yeah.
And what I need you to understand is that the game is aware that there are two devices in there. There's the SciTech throttle and the SciTech joystick. And it is aware that they have different axes that you can use. But as far as it's concerned, they are also like, everything is just button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. It's simple enough at first. The trigger on the joystick is button 1. The big like thumb button up at the top of the stick, where you would often like have missiles bound or something, that's button 2. Then you start getting into, in the case of the stick itself, it has 3 hat switches.
Oh shit.
One it recognizes as a hat switch, but
can you explain what is a hat switch?
A hat switch is basically like a clickier version of a D-pad. Honestly, is how it tends to operate. Useful for like scrolling down, like in a flight sim, like multifunction displays, right? Which you'll be able to tab around inside a in-game display and select highlight different options, etc.
So in Everspace, would this be like, I want to switch between like the different special features you have, like the EMP like blast or your different missiles or whatever?
Yeah, that would have been one logical way of doing it. But the thing is, you also need things for like, I need to switch weapons, so you need to have a hat dedicated to that.
Yeah.
I tried valiantly to figure out a way to have every single flight control the ship can execute tied to a different axis, but there are too many. So the way it works on mine is so pitch up, like nose up, nose down, is, you might expect, like tied to the front and back motion of the joystick.
Yeah.
Roll, wing dip left, wing dip right, is tied to the left and right movement of the stick. And then
good.
yaw, nose swing left, nose swing right, I tied to the twist axis. But because this is a little spaceship, it can also strafe. It can go straight up. It can go straight down, straight side to side. And I got the brilliant idea of there are little wheels on the throttle, like thumb wheels. See this little button? It's ringed by a wheel.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I could use that as an axis to control this. No, you can't. Don't do that. That's not going to work.
Oh no.
Those are for like adjusting trim in a flight sim. So what I ended up doing was I dedicated one of the hat switches to the strafe left, strafe right, strafe up, strafe down. That works reasonably well.
Sure.
But then every single system, so it's like you have your consumables. You're going to you want to fire off your special attack ability. You need to get, you need to use your little repair robots. I need little buttons for those. And it just becomes really hard to track what you're doing because what you're laying out makes some intuitive sense to you.
Yeah.
But the game is just like, we'll assign that to button 32. And I'm like, button 32. That's not how I think of it. What the fuck is button 32?
What the fuck is button 32?
Right. So for instance, like it's got the throttle has all these fun little switches.
Oh wow. Look at that.
You can feel like a real spaceman like using that to toggle things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't know that's a switch.
Right.
The up position is a button. The down position is a different button.
Yeah.
And so I spent that entire afternoon playing with controls, going into the game, discovering a different shortcoming, going back out, fussing with the controls some more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until I got to a reasonable setup, at which point it was time to go pick up the dog. And there was no more game time.
Oh, God. I ejected a lot faster. It was still like easily like 20 minutes of the 60 minutes I ended up having with the game anyways. But still, I like just there's too many options, and for some reason you can accidentally mapped two different buttons to one option at one point, and I was like, "What is happening here?" And I couldn't find it.
I tried that with the roll specifically. Like I actually tried to map strafing and rolling to the same stick, which you can do, and it makes it feel a little.
Wait, why?
Huh?
Why?
Wait, how would that work?
Why? How would that work? Why would you do that?
You essentially the ship becomes, again, this was like trying to solve a problem that didn't have an obvious solution, and I was like, well, how fussy is that going to be? And like it basically, like, it's worth trying just to see how it feels. Like it gives the ship like a really unique. It just feels like really kind of slippery and fast.
Okay.
So you're talking about you're going in a circle? Is that what you're talking about?
No, so if that's interesting. So when you would
it's
throw
more like
when you throw
the
stick to the right, it would turn right and dip.
Right, it's kind of like at a 45-degree angle. That's probably describing
which
it.
I think it feels a bit like how the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games played back in the day. I think this was how like Lawrence Holland worked around like the fact that flight controls are not intuitive.
So it was like it worked. Like I was able to control the ship, but it didn't. It did not feel compatible with the game that was in front of me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this solved it in that I can do both at the same time, but it didn't feel good. So I eventually just ditched it, and I have made my peace with the lack of roll, and I will maybe go into the Xbox app and see if I can fuss with the tabs. But like at the end of the day, like the game feels fine without the roll.
Is there
able to shoot.
It also always I couldn't find it. Is there an option to turn off the auto centering or like change the way that works? Okay.
Yeah.
It caught me by surprise a few times when I was like, especially in that little tutorial area where you're like trying to get through the door, and I was like, oh, I have to line up, don't I? Like that's just what I assumed I would have to do. There's enough space, you don't have to actually roll at all. But it kept like suddenly slowly moving me back, and I was like, wait, what? I need to. I need to line up. Please let me.
Yeah, that's just in the options menu. I forget which one, but like it's in the controls. Like you can turn if you don't want that, then or temporarily you don't. You can flip it on and off.
It definitely feels like it's just the game doesn't care about rolling at all, and it's just like it's there because we should have it as a space game in theory, but
it's just not mechanically required to play the game.
The fact
but
that
I feel like
that
part of the
level,
hero's journey I am on is like having the roll. So it does feel like something is missing for sure.
Just the fact that the auto level is the default and it kicks in pretty quickly. What?
I believe the auto level is only default on controller.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah, I believe the auto level is
My
only.
ship ain't auto leveling.
Yeah, I've never auto leveled even for a second.
Well, wouldn't that make sense? Like because on the controller, by default, how they've assigned the controls, you would want that feature more than you would want it on a keyboard.
Yes.
Well, I wish it were
a
separate button, right? Like, okay, I've rolled. I don't care about it.
Button?
Let me. That's the issue, right?
Exactly.
That's the issue. I don't know. Let me double click the fucking stick or something to reset my level.
No, I'm with you. Actually, a double click would totally work.
Yeah.
Like
that sounds like it would work. The thing that I'll say is like this game definitely came out on consoles, but as someone who has played it with keyboard and mouse, it is very like the systems and like controls are very much built around them, and I think that it is very, very interesting to hear y'all's experience trying to play on controller, which I played for like 5 minutes and was like, actually, I think that keyboard and mouse feels better.
What does WASD do then?
WASD moves you forward, backward, and strafe.
Okay.
And then you use your mouse to actually control pitch and yaw is controlled with mouse.
Yeah, that always feels weird to me.
And then you use E and Q to roll.
Yeah, that
and so you sense. You can do the strafe and roll simultaneously.
Yeah, I'm touching that with my fingers. Ew.
What do you mean?
No, that seems fine to me.
That's totally
the real
fine.
thing that gets me is always like it doesn't feel right to use a mouse because I don't want to invert mouse look almost ever.
Wait,
but I want to
wait.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kato. It's important to note the game has a reticle.
I know.
That you point at things.
Yeah. But you invert when you're flying a ship. You always invert the fucking look.
Not if you're using a reticle to point at a thing.
Yeah.
Are you trying to suggest to me that if you wanted to shoot at someone who is let's use this term here,
I pull back on the stick. I pull back on the stick.
You pull back on the stick, but that's a different thing than a mouse, Kata. What are you talking about?
But this is what I'm saying.
You're telling me that you would bring your mouse cursor to the bottom of the screen to shoot someone who is above you.
I'm with you. That feels wrong.
No.
But what I want is for the
ship's nose is following the reticle.
The ship's nose is following the reticle.
And that fucks me
but
up.
That's where
the disconnect happens. Because I want a ship to when I pull back on the thing that's controlling the nose to go up.
Kato, you know what you should do is you should go to no cockpit view and no ship view. Just look at the star field and just be a reticle in space.
Just be a reticle in space.
Just be a reticle in space.
That's definitely what I think I have to do.
I'm losing my mind.
That might eliminate some of the.
I just need to get a HOTAS. I just need to.
Obviously doesn't work.
And then take a day off
that
work.
Obviously doesn't work. Rob just talked about this.
Well, hold on. I got there.
Yeah, it just takes a bit.
Let me be very clear.
Just take some dedication.
I did emerge victorious. Now,
did he play the game or have any impressions of how he feels about it? No, certainly not.
No, I played a fair bit. Okay. Not really, but I've played some good opening missions. And
game shows that Rob played 7 hours. Wow, he must be like that's like halfway through the game.
Is this game's so much fucking harder with a HOTAS. It's like incredibly difficult.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes.
Because all the shit where it's just like you're throwing the mouse around, the ship's just kind of following the mouse. Instead, imagine thinking about you're simultaneously like putting in throttle, you're twisting the stick to the left to bring the nose around. You are also pushing it down to bring the nose down, and then you're also rolling. It's always like you're always doing 4 things at once.
There's an option
Every weapon in this game is gimbaled. Every weapon in this game is gimbaled. So you're not like the weapon doesn't fire directly in front of your ship, or is not designed to fire directly in front of your ship. Is designed to.
I gotta get it. I gotta get it in the vicinity of the target before the tracking goes. So I gotta at least like be roughly on the target if that tracking is going to go, which is a godsend. Having the tracking work is cool.
It understand does it understand throttle the way it's supposed to, like, because it doesn't on sticks, right? On the
it does okay. So when my throttle, well, it's a little tricky when the throttle's in the neutral position. I'm neither putting forward or back motion on the ship. When the throttle is yeah.
Okay. There's an automatic stop happening. I
could turn off the inertial damper.
That's what that is. Okay. There's an option for that
where I just keep floating. Yeah. But that gets real interesting because you can also like impart a bunch of like angular momentum to yourself, and
that's fun.
And then you're continuing to sort of like travel and spin. It's great. And that feels really fun when you're sort of letting your ship fly one way with like conserved momentum, and then you're pointing the other way and like blasting people. That feels great every time you do it. I got that little switch, so I can toggle the inertial damper on or off.
Nice,
feels great. Undeniably, it's so much harder to engage in combat this way. It is like, the way I would put it is I have to fly really evasively to get into closer range, where some of the fine point control doesn't become as much of an issue over targeting. Now,
you're running an arcade shooter at sim,
right?
Like at sim control speed. Like that, those feel like those are two things that are pulling in opposite directions. Like sim shooters operate slower because that is going to.
So it occurred to me, I was like, this is fucked up. I should not play mouse and keyboard.
And then what happened, Rob?
Sadly, all the muscle memory is now and my entire understanding of this game is now wired to the throttle and stick.
100%.
And I was like, this feels so fucking weird now. I was like, the ship was just like going everywhere, like, whoa. And I was like, I don't like the way this feels. It doesn't feel like a ship anymore. It feels too loosey, a little too goosey. And so I'm like, I would have to go back to the tutorial, redo everything, and like relearn to play this game with mouse and keyboard.
I'm glad that everyone's enjoying their time with Everspace too.
See, but here be my counterpoint. If the game, like this game is meant to be played with mouse and keyboard, then they shouldn't have like 3 distinct invitations to be like, actually, you can make any control scheme work with it. Well, you can, and I'm taking advantage of that offer. But if it truly is a case where like, we didn't actually figure out how to make this design work, except with a free look mouse and a keyboard, then you kind of have like the real control scheme, and then 2 other alternate control schemes that like we are suggesting as a way to play, but actually don't really work.
I want to be clear. Like the role, I think, is mostly like aesthetic preference at a certain level. The game is completely 100% playable, fun, fine with the gamepad. If the game did not have role in the tutorial, you would not miss it when you played it. The problem was it said, hey, you want to roll?
Hey,
and I was like, yeah, I do want to roll. But if the game had never presented that, and it was just buried as like an advanced control option in the gamepad, I would have just moved forward fine.
I feel like I do want roll, because the sheer number of times, like when I need to be really sneaky and escapey under fire from like at this point it's still mostly just pirates running around. But like when there's like a ton of enemy fighters and their little shithead drones all popping off at me, and I need to just like go and evade that fire, frequently by like running along the ruins of other ships or ducking. Like asteroids are useful too, but like the thing that can really shake pursuit is you get into the twisting structures of like space stations or like ruined ships. And boy, I find rolls very handy to sort of navigate the tiny little gaps that you have open to you. And
I
so
guess I just haven't found myself in those situations.
You may not need to, yeah, because like you're having an easier time.
I'm
like,
just shooting them down, Rob.
Right. Whereas I'm like, well, okay. I guess honestly, the encounter that caused me the most problems was I was up against drones that I think had like rail guns on them.
Yeah, is this when you're doing like the outposts?
Yeah,
mission. Yeah, so that's the one I just finished. It's the first time the game pushed back on me.
Yeah.
Difficulty wise, like this is a game that even with the gamepad, I was you just kind of, hey, there's some enemies, time to boost in and like use my cool special power, and like I'm just really not thinking except like things are exploding and I'm catching.
And suddenly you're like, oh, a 1,500 meter disparity between max range. You really feel that.
Yeah, you do.
It's the first time the game like killed me multiple times. I like Googled, I was like, difficulty spike? And it was mostly like, just stop being a dumbass and slow down. And I was like, okay, I guess I could do that instead. Which was like, it suddenly was a sequence in which I was using closer to what you're talking about, where like you have these massive asteroids, big chunks of rock next to you. And I'm using them as cover to like sneak out and then like, I think I'm using a coil gun. I think, Ren, that is the one that you were talking about, which is kind of like the build-up sniper rifle.
No, that's the railgun. The railgun is the thing that charges.
Maybe that is what I'm using. Yeah. So that's the one that I'm using.
Fires at 3.5 kilometers.
Right, and so it's very useful to like take out these annoying drones you're talking about, to take out these turrets that like can just shred your ship. At least the default one, because you don't have enough money early on to buy anything else. But so I'm mostly using the rocks to kind of like strafe around, and then sort of like, and as long as I'm taking things out slowly at a time, and like, hey, reinforcers are coming. Like, all right, well, like hide the station so those turrets can't get me. Take out those reinforcements. Go back to plucking those off. It's weird. I suddenly feel like I'm playing a third person shooter. I just happen to be in a ship, and it adopts a very different sort of feel, because the vastness of space is less relevant than me using this giant rock as cover and then peeking out, shooting, and then coming back. And then once I adopted that approach, the mission was not trivial, but like it was definitely like I was able to do it and then do another one of the outposts just fine. But it is a fundamentally sort of different approach to combat. But I really enjoyed it.
So the mission that caused me like my first problems, the first time I died, basically was I don't think it was the mission you're talking about, Patrick. It was I had to pick up a thing for a guy who had a scanner, and it turns out to be, ultimately you're getting paint for a cool pirate gang. But the first place he sends you is guarded by there's a pirate at the center of it, but then there's also these drones that have the 3 lasers that sort of zero in on you. And so you get ample warning that you're being targeted.
You're fucked.
But I was like, I can't shoot and I hadn't realized, because the game hadn't pulled this trick on me yet. It was the first time that the enemy could strike me from much further away than I could. Like I wasn't getting any like locking from my missiles. I wasn't getting, my weapons weren't effective at that range. And meanwhile, because I'd sort of been conditioned to hang back, I was trying to like nose in on this perimeter against like sniper rifles. And so finally for me, the solution there was you got to lean in on the fact that you're living that HOTAS life, and you got to boost in under their range, and you like wait for that like laser to converge, at which point you hit a little bit of boost, a little bit of lateral thrust, and you juke out of the way of the shot, and then you get in there. But then you got a bunch of enemies like on you, and it's a bit of a crowd control situation. They're all sort of shooting at once, and that's where I was sort of going through the solar panels and the superstructure of the space station, letting that thing soak up their shots and block their line of sight while I kept like sort of popping out, gunning things down until I cleared the area. Felt amazing. Like this was the trade-off was like it was a pretty boilerplate encounter, but like every time I'm sort of spinning the ship through like various bits of wreckage and space station, hell yeah, I feel like Starbuck or Luke Skywalker. It feels great. And like I dig like things I love are the weapons have different characters. I love that the autocannon has to spin up for a beat before you just unload that like hailstorm of metal on a target. Every time you get that, you time it just right, where the spin up happens as you're bringing the reticle across, and then you just like perforate the target. It feels so good.
So I assume everyone is playing on normal difficulty, given your control structure. No, Kato? What are you doing, Kato?
One above, whatever it was. I don't know. I don't remember what it was.
It has like 5 settings, right?
Yeah,
it's got a couple. It's not like
so you're like on medium hard.
Yeah, basically.
Got it.
I died trying to figure out rolling in that first fight, the very first fight.
I couldn't be me, but I respect it.
I was just curious because I've been playing the game on, I believe, either the hardest or the second hardest. I don't remember which, and so I was just curious because like I think that I've had to make a lot of the same. Oh, I'm in a bad situation. Let me make a way out of it, but with a very different control scheme leading me to that conclusion, and then giving me very different solutions to those problems. But I was just curious.
Did I? I'm trying to. I had a moment where I couldn't figure out if I just aimed incorrectly, or do missiles have a range here?
They do. Yeah,
God
you have to lock on.
Damn it,
Kato, are you not locking on?
No, I mean I am, but at one point I was like, in theory, if I just line this up, a missile should just go straight forever, right? Until I hit something. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how missiles work.
No, that's...
It's not in this game,
regrettably,
right?
It's in the same way that, like, if you turn off inertial dampers, you still can't accelerate forever until you, like, achieve the speed of light. Like, it's gonna be like, no, that's not gonna happen.
No, we have to, for balance reasons, we gotta make them just kind of disappear at a certain point.
I mean, rockets work that way in this game. Rockets are unguided. They just have like an optimal firing range. But rockets are unguided. Missiles are not. Guided missiles have a final range at which point they detonate. But rockets.
Bam! Like, so if you got rockets and you got a distant large target that's like set like say 10 kilometers out.
10 kilometers? I don't know about 10 fucking kilometers. You can't even see someone at 10 kilometers.
You can see big things at 10
a big
kilometers.
rock.
That's kind of the thing.
You can see a speck at 10 kilometers. How, like, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about, but like, I don't think you can fire 10 kilometers. No, I don't know if the game is even like properly loading things at that range.
Yeah. Right. That's the thing.
Right,
it's
like
probably...
combat, the max combat range here is 3.5 kilometers. That is the railgun, right? That is the maximum range at which you can like actually engage with someone.
Yeah. But like it is like it's really cool. Like it's part of I think why it's such a bastard to set up in some ways with the control maps, but like also there's a lot of fun stuff to fuss with in this game, but it doesn't feel that cumbersome because ultimately you still are having moments where it's like, yeah, this is kind of dissenty. In a way that feels terrific.
Yeah, and I think that the dissentiness of it all is why I played with mouse and keyboard, which is why I just defaulted to mouse and keyboard, because like you are stopping a lot, at least in my experience. Like you are like stopping your ship and then like coming around a corner in a way that feels very much I should be using WASD to move through this space in this way, and in a way that I like find interesting.
I think I've got like, so for things like that, I've gotten to a place now where, for me, like the controls, a lot of times, like I will have a sense of like I'm swooping around a corner rather than like sometimes like when I'm like spelunking in a dead ship, for instance, which is a fun thing. I love this part too. There is so much, here's a ghost ship. It's got goodies aboard it, but how can we get into that ship? And you got to like steer your little ship through the wreckage and like float around, try to figure out.
See the container. It's right there. Where's that container? And you got to find the right angle. And it may not even be locked behind something. It's just you have to navigate over to the one space, and that becomes part of the puzzle.
It's Everspace's equivalent of like the Far Cry radio tower thing, but also like way more fun.
Well, also the way you get the little, my guess is these maybe get repetitive 10 hours from now, but right now they're still delightful, where you're jumping into, light speed or whatever equivalent, they have here. But like you're in that kind of like middle ground, and like you can get like a distress signal. It's like, yo, you want to jump out of this? And like stop off and do this little thing on the way. And those are a little fun. They so far seem to just be, I don't know, you're going to get a loot drop and there's like 6 enemies. There's not a whole lot to them. And I'm suspecting that doesn't change over the course of the game. But conceptually, I like the notion that, well, I'm off to go do this thing. Well, how in a space game are we going to interrupt the player from going point A to point B, given that a lot of space travel can kind of fundamentally just be a fast travel option? And it's like, oh, well, in this little spot, we're going to give you something to kind of interrupt that flow and maybe gesture towards something you could do over here. Just like the 4 times I've done it. It's like, well, I'll do enough to accomplish this challenge that the game is dangling in front of me. I don't know that I'm going to like RIP to the other people that need help. I think after that challenge is fulfilled, I don't know that I'm answering another distress call.
This is why all those people on the Titanic died. Because like you were just like, distress calls, those are never anything.
Well, I mean that is what the person said when they were like, "Can I have some nanobots or what? Whatever heals your health equivalent." And he's like, "Wow, nobody ever answers these." And it's like, yeah, that'll be me in a couple of hours of this game, bud.
That's definitely a thing where each time I pop out, it's like, yep, it's a little random encounter. But I like that they're so skippable too. I like that it's not like like when I go back to a game like Privateer, for instance, all the way back in the day. So much of that game was just, I want to go from point A to point B, but I have to go through like 12 different jumps to get there. And at each single waypoint, there's a high probability of bullshit that I've got to encounter. I've got to like fight my way through. And here, a lot of that cruft is kind of just moved off, and you can sort of stay on critical path. And then like,
well, it's not dissimilar to the way a lot of 16-bit era RPGs, the game styled on that. Like, hey, like I'm just trying to go get that treasure chest on the other side of this map, and you're gonna get 5 random encounters on the way there. Some of that exists for balance issues, and this game has a leveling system, so it's like you need to hit some level of encounters to have to kind of progress through that system. But also at a certain point, it's like, yo, just let me get there. Like, I'm good.
Yeah, it's again like the Assassin's Creed parallel is like somebody's like, oh, please help me. You take a look, it's like, how good is your character model? And it's just a generic face.
Amazing. Racial profiling has reached video games.
It's sorry. You're a prol. I'm not here to deal with prol problems. Now, if you were a secondary character with like a voice actor assigned to you that gets credited for this role, then we could talk. But regrettably, I'm gonna have to let these wolves or pirates or whatever is happening. They got to eat too.
Circle of life.
Yeah. There's also like, I find the most endearing thing when a game has like a big in-game glossary, and the glossary has to explain things like resources. I went to the in-game glossary. It's explaining like the what's G and B. Oh, it's the big corporate cartel that basically like runs this entire sector, like Company Town. Who's the Okar? Who are they? But then also it will have an entry for resources. Resources are goods that are necessary for developing manufacturing technologies, or it's like there's a glossary entry for like, what are natural resources, what are weapons, and I'm like, bless your heart. I love this for you, game. I love that you're like, it's all lore, baby.
It's lore to somebody, Rob. Someone out here. Yeah. Everspace 2 might be their first game. And we just don't want to overlook them.
and they've not been. They're like, in a prelapsarian state where they're like, they don't even know what weapons are. You can show a picture of a gun and they're like, what
I mean,
that?
I will say the game does distinguish between weapons and sub-weapons, which I think is why you would maybe want a glossary entry, is so you can make it clear that you're talking about the primary weapons that you click with as opposed to the secondary weapons which you shoot out of a rocket and go in a different slot.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, if you want a serious answer to the question instead of us making fun of the
that's
glossary, you can say that, right?
That's also being explained by the control interface. But yeah, the glossary entry stuff is just magnificent. I love it. And I love that it's always accompanied by little concept art from the game. As far as like, right now I'm still very much in the stage of the endless RPG chain of favors. I'm still in the, like, my buddy got fucked up in the opening cutscene. He's still not doing good. And it's like, we got to get him medical care. And so it's all like built around that, where I'm just going from place to place trying to get the next MacGuffin to get this guy med pod. I think I'm on the closing stage of that, which brings me to, like, there's cool things. Like right now I'm in a stealth mission where it's like, go into this cargo depot and there are like ships are going through these like scanner gates to like have their cargo verified or whatever, but it's slowly moving planes of like laser scanners, and then you hack the machines and the scanner slows down, creating little gaps you can fly your little ship in and go up to the target and like steal shit out of the trunk effectively. And like, this is really cool that the game supports this. That there's this entire little like stealth dynamic that you can get into play, and I assume that's gonna, like, it feels like right now everything they're introducing you to is like gonna become part of like a core like mechanical language of the game. If you just want to fuck off and do piracy, like this is how you do like thieving.
I mean, like this, you're in the tutorial area, right? Like it's not just there is a tutorial. The entire like first like Cedo is the tutorial area. The game opens up massively once you leave Cedo, after some like plot stuff happens. Like the video game has not yet begun. It is still in like the prologue section effectively.
The story gets more interesting once it has its proper beginning right now, right? Because like right now it's you're kind of the gormless little clone, who's kind of being led along by his nose because of the tutorial. But yeah, it's
there's like a really good narrative hook at the end of Cedo. And then very quickly things start falling into place as to like what the big job, like there's the big job that keeps being referenced in the first like area of the game. And once what the big job is gets revealed, the plot really gets going. And so like that happens a little like a ways after leaving Cedo. But yeah, there's like plot stuff that happens that I think is worth your time. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to keep sinking time into it, and it's going to take time because with these controls, ain't nothing coming easy. I tripped those sensors so many times because I was like, whoops, I accidentally imparted a little reverse throttle when I was just trying to stop, and I backed into a sensor. But hey, these are all ways that I'm just going to get better controlling the ship. It's all, are these failures or are these learning opportunities?
Does your throttle have like a little catch at neutral, or is it like smooth?
It has just about every other thing. Like every knob and wheel has like a neutral position that's sort of marked with a little catch. The throttle doesn't. And my suspicion is because most things you have 0 throttle and then 100% throttle saturation.
Right.
What you don't have is 100 negative 100.
Right.
But like at least it's marked off with little hashes. So like I can at least like look down and see where I'm at in terms of the throttle position. But also like it's something I appreciate about the game is like every time thrusters fire, the appropriate thrusters are shown on the ship, like going, certain intensity. So it sort of does give you decent feedback as to what's happening between the ship and your controls. But yeah, it's like it's really interesting. It's a wildly customizable game, maybe almost too much so. The experience of playing it from the cockpit view versus like the third person is also kind of profound because the cockpit view has a ton of like useful interface stuff on it that is in some ways like more cleanly laid out than it is in the like HUD overlay. But then you're also wasting a lot of screen real estate with cockpit art, which is pretty, but I might need to see where the enemy fighters are a little more than I need to see what the cockpit looks like. But yeah, it's really neat, and I'm glad we've all caught Everspace fever. I'm
thrilled.
The Ever fever.
You sound thrilled. It's been. I can't wait to tell you more about the awesome ways I've elected to play.
I know.
This
I'm
game.
so excited. No, I'm excited to hear how it goes. Legitimately, I'm excited to hear how it goes.
I have kind of resigned myself to maybe this will work out, but there might be a point where I'm like, I need the mouse and keyboard to do this. Like, I need to hit these shots, and I need to not be wrestling with the controls. But maybe I won't. I'm very curious to see if this can get to the point where it's like perfectly intuitive and seamless.
You know what? We here at Waypoint are lifelong learners, and I'm always saying this. And I think that Everspace 2 is going to be a big learning experience. I think everyone on staff is going to find this to be a learning experience.
Speaking of learning experiences, what have you learned playing
OTXO? OTXO is a Hotline Miami-esque. That's what the PR email used. It's a comparison they're inviting. Hotline Miami-esque top-down twin-stick shooter that I actually really, really like. It is set in a really stark black and white, kind of like neo-noir-ish world where you are playing as an otherwise unnamed protagonist called an OTXO, which is a word that means wolf, as they basically go on a revenge-fueled quest through this mansion that... an undying revenge-filled quest through a mansion as they try and find the person who was taken from them in addition to their lost memories. And you do this by effectively Hotline Miami-ing your way through this like really expansive like complex. And I think it like comes together really well. I would describe like the rhythm to it as John Wick-esque in terms of like, if Hotline Miami is about memorizing levels, which I think it is, after like when you are playing Hotline Miami, you are memorizing room and enemy placements to then go through them as quickly and combo heavy as possible in order to like chase scores, right? OTXO has you doing that same thing, but on a micro scale, where you are like, okay, I vaguely recognize this room layout. How am I going to move through it as I try and keep this combo meter up in these levels that are... I believe slightly procedurally generated, or at least like there are building blocks being put together, right? And in addition to all of that, you can take a little bit more damage than you can in Hotline Miami because Hotline Miami is a one hit and you're done game. This is you can take a few bullets game because you're fighting significantly more enemies. And then finally, there's a slow motion power that is like, I think a classic of the top-down shooter and like specifically games that are like slightly derived from Max Payne. There's a Max Payne-y energy here with the like neo-noir aesthetics, the slowing down time.
Someone done me wrong and
roll.
I'm angry and haunted.
Exactly. And it's all like painted with very broad strokes, but like the moment-to-moment combat is extremely satisfying. The reason that I compare it to John Wick is that, like, I think part of the choreography of those movies is that John Wick has to take hits. That is one of the things I really like about, like, fight scenes in that series is the fact that, like, you cannot dodge every blow. You cannot block every blow. Sometimes you just have to take a shot to the ribs and accept that and try to mitigate that shot to your ribs. And then keep going. And it gives this like attritional effect to some fight scenes, like the throwing knife scene from Parabellum, John Wick 3 Parabellum. By the end of that scene, he is limping. He is barely able to walk because he is just exhausted from having fought like 7 guys simultaneously. And I don't think Hotline Miami really gives you that feeling. OTXO does. Getting down to like a sliver of your health with 6 guys left and only like 10 rounds in your pistol feels really good because it becomes this moment of, okay, I know the tools on the board. I have 3 seconds to plan this out. How am I going to like improvise dance my way through this space? In a way that I think is like really fun. I've put like when I'm like looking for like something to do for 30 minutes in the evening, while I wait for like my girlfriend to get home or something like that, I have been booting up OTXO and being like, let me take a quick run. I think it's a very cute little roguelike. And also like there are upgrades. It's like the standard, like you get to choose from one of 3 options after every run, after every like level, or after every few levels. And you can get extra upgrades if you earn more money, and you earn more money by keeping your combo higher. And so not only is it like facilitating this, like, so if Hotline Miami facilitates score chasing, OTXO kind of demands it, for you to actually be able to have enough money to afford the upgrades that are going to keep your character survivable into the latter half of the game.
I have a question. This is a game shooting a lot of dudes, right? Dudes everywhere shooting them up. Blood. And I was like kind of scrubbing through like a trailer, and I appear to see, correct me if I maybe not encountered this enemy, the inbred basilisk,
I love the inbred basilisk,
which appears to be an enormous snake filling the screen.
Enormous snake filling the screen. Also, every segment of its body has guns tied to it.
Cool.
Also, so does its face. Also has a rocket launcher. Sometimes it leaves mines.
All right.
Oh my god!
You didn't have to tell me that. I just connected the dots and just assumed that's where this enemy logically. But the boss battles specifically, I have like there's someone that I think was called Mr. Destruction. It's just a guy in a tiny tank, going around the room. Like, what's going on here?
There are some like very like fun, surrealist horror elements to this game that kind of just like crop up now and again. Like one of the things, one of like the conceptual horrors of this setting is that all of the people who work in the mansion have been here for like what feels like centuries of time. They're just fucking stuck here. Like the OTXOs come and go when they find like their heart in the center of the mansion or whatever the fuck. However, groundskeeper Eric just works here. Like he truly just has to hang out. And so these like surrealist elements, help to like vary the game's tone just enough where it's like not exclusively let me put my face up to the grimdark waterfall. Instead it's like, okay, the inbred basilisk is very silly. Mr. Destruction,
the abhorrence, which appears to be a giant gecko.
That's very good.
Yeah, Patrick, it rules. I think this game absolutely rules. The one thing I will say is that the boss fights are I think the boss fights do lose something, which is like a lot of the boss fights are pretty bullet spongy, and you go into a boss fight with one weapon that has infinite ammo. So like that you can reload infinitely, because every other gun in the game has usually one extra magazine worth of ammunition. Because again, it is doing the John Wick thing of I'm gonna pick up a gun.
You're just picking up what gets dropped from the other enemies.
And like I can reload once, and that's a really good feeling to have those moments. And like same thing with like the moment of like, okay, I have an extra magazine here. I have 2 bullets left in the silenced pistol. I can take out a guy with 2 bullets, but there's 6 coming around the corner. Right? Like, how do I want to approach the situation? Can I make this work without having to take the time to reload? And sometimes the answer to that is, I'm going to come around the corner, pop, then do a melee kick on the next guy, then throw a gun into the face of the third guy, pick up the second guy's gun and open fire. And like, that is John Wick to me. That is John Wick-esque behavior, if I've ever seen it. But the boss fights do not have that same energy. They are just like twin stick shooter boss fights in a way that is like a little bit disappointing. I wish that they had found a way to integrate that like improvisational choreographed approach to combat into those fights. Those boss fights don't even have like a combo meter. It feels like something completely out of a different video game, for better and for worse.
That does sound like an odd decision because, like, yeah, the main part of the game you described sounds awesome, and like this is why you made this game. And the second part sounds kind of like both generic and also like this is the type of stuff that does tend to be the most frustrating that people encounter. So it's going to take you away from like the part of the game that's probably gotten you hooked. And I understand like sometimes there's value in like varying pacing of anything, you know, like sometimes you need that like other movement, but I don't know. It doesn't sound like this was this was the quiet slowed down section that this needed.
Yeah, and the game does have those, right? There are like memory sequences and like the bar that you get your upgrades from where like everything does slow down. But like there are entire upgrade paths that become useless against bosses. For example, a thing I love to do in this game is play with kunai. There are throwing knives in this game. I love to make a throwing knife build. There is one upgrade you get that every time you throw a throwing knife, you also throw 2 additional throwing knives next to it in like a fanning spread. And then another ability that every time you roll, you pull a throwing knife out of your pocket if you don't have a weapon equipped. And those 2 things combined like make for really fun like play. Those don't really work in boss fights. The boss fights are about shooting a big guy with a machine gun a bunch. Yeah. And like, that's a bummer to me. Or there's like another knife upgrade that turns the knives into throwing axes, which you can like then Thor-esque pull to you from across the room. And in doing so, they will like hit enemies in their pathway. And like, it completely changes how you approach these levels once you get that upgrade. And it's just completely irrelevant in boss fights because the throwing knives are never an option in the weapon selection room for boss fights, and they will not let you enter boss fight rooms with those non-standard weapons like grenades, kunai, or throwing axes.
I guess the last question, like, I don't think you mentioned this. Music.
Music good.
Because all right, because when I think about like Hotline Miami, that's the other part of it. Like one thing that made it feel so good doing that was just like that the game was like always felt like in tune with itself.
Music good. I think aesthetically, this game is like excellently put. I think this game is about as well put together aesthetically as Hotline Miami is. It's just going for a different aesthetic. It's aiming for like the neo noir, black and white with like really stark red, as opposed to Hotline Miami's like Mandy-esque color palette.
Yeah. That sounds really cool. And certainly like it certainly doesn't feel to me like that a lot of games have successfully played in Hotline Miami sandbox since that game came
they've
out.
been I was actually talking with Galt about this after that piece came out, where he was like, yeah, it's really weird that there haven't been like dozens or hundreds of Hotline Miami clones. And I think that like 1, there were in Flash games, but 2, I think it's just really hard. Like I think that like once Hotline Miami comes out, you're kind of fucked if you want to do that exact thing, because it's just like you can't do the Hotline Miami. You just cannot. It's not going to work. And this goes just to the left of it enough where like, the thing that I end the piece that I wrote about it with is that it feels like that OTXO has like carved a hole in Hotline Miami's shadow. It's not out of Hotline Miami's shadow at all, but it does have there is a space carved in it where you can go, that is where OTXO is, and it is distinct, right? I can see that space in the shadow of Hotline Miami. There's a little pinprick of light here, or like a little like beam of light here that is this other thing. And so yeah, I think it's neat.
Awesome.
Worth quickly just mentioning, spelled OTXO if you're trying to like look up this game later, because I had trouble I was like, Ocho, like the number 8 in Spanish? No, it's not that pronounced that way, but on Steam it's OTXO.
We're gonna take a break here, but when we come back, I think we're gonna be listening to an interview that Patrick did. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about what we're gonna hear next?
Yeah, I had a chance to chat with the CEO of Six to Start, Adrian Hon, who, when I was starting out running, when I was trying to find out ways to motivate myself to do that running, and Zombies Run was this sort of like narrative game that would like, hey, you've got to run, like it was a story that played out based on what you would put in as different, like I'm going to run a mile or 2 miles or whatever. And it would like fit in little narrative beats. And it was really important in me finding ways to get comfortable with running before I like found what I actually wanted to listen to, which was just endless podcasts. But that game has been really successful and around for a long time. It continues to be around. And the studio intended to make a bunch of different things and then ended up just making lots of Zombies Run since around 2014. But they just announced a new game called Marvel Move, which kind of like sort of fits where like The Walking Dead had kind of just started. Zombies were like at the center of the cultural universe when Zombies Run kicked around. And even if the MCU is faltering a bit, Marvel, is a huge cultural force. So it makes sense that they would partner with them to try and come up with another project. And so we don't talk a ton about Marvel Move in this conversation. It's more about like fitness, our relationships to bodies, and like the rise and like shuffling away of gamification and things like that. It's a really interesting conversation about, also a discussion on what is motivation and what is exploitation, which is especially relevant in creations like this. So it was a really fun conversation, and I hope people enjoy it.
All right, and we're going to take a quick break, and that interview will be next. Remember, Waypoint Plus listeners get this podcast ad-free. Learn more at waypointplus.com and see how you can fill this break with anything but ads. Back after this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Waypoint Radio. Once again, I am glad to be bringing you another interview. Like we've been kind of bringing these into the show every once in a while, and I'm glad to have another one on the docket. This one brings me way back because the last time I've talked to this person was way back in 2014 when I were many jobs ago, many years ago, before children, before so many things. But I am pleased to welcome to Waypoint Radio Adrian Hon, the CEO of 6 to Start. Do you describe yourselves as a fitness company? How do you even categorize a game developer? Like where does that actually fall for you?
Well, I think it's more kind of a description of what it is we happen to be doing right now, rather than, we founded the company and decided all we want to do in our lives is fitness games. When we founded 6 to Start back, I don't know, something terrifying like, 13 years ago. This was when alternate reality games were still fairly new, and we couldn't say that we made ARGs because people wouldn't know what that meant. So we just said that we made games that mix storytelling, gameplay, and the real world. So you can see how ARGs fit into that, and also how fitness games fit in, because they are, especially if you add in storytelling, that's what we really like. But we're best known for our fitness games for things like Zombies Run now, and so it just seems better to acknowledge reality rather than did these other things as well, a decade ago. Come on, guys.
Well, I guess your relation. So the company was sort of started around like the notion of ARGs. Like how distant are you from? I guess I Love Bees is like, if you're into video games, sort of like that Halo 2 I Love Bees is like one of the most notable ones in terms of, something my audience would know. Is it like roughly that era that sort of kicks off your interest in wanting to start a company around it?
Precisely. I mean, I got into games because of ARGs. That was my way into the industry. Like, I always wanted to be a game designer, and unsurprisingly, no one wants to hire you as a game designer if you've never made a game before. The interesting thing about ARGs was that you could make them with just like a website and HTML and voicemails and email autoresponders. So that's how I got in back, first by playing, The Beast, which was an ARG, to promote the movie Artificial Intelligence, but also then starting to make ARGs back in 2004, some of the earliest ones, and then effectively making ARGs for other companies in 2007. So that's how we kind of got started. And, the problem with ARGs is that they're kind of hard to get into. If you ever look them up, people write about them a lot, but then reading through lots of forum posts and doing puzzles, it sounds amazing, but a bit like EVE Online, actually playing it is a bit more challenging. So, like after doing that, I was like, I would love to make a game. I'd love to make an experience that was much easier for people to get into, but still feels really immersive and still feels kind of tied to the real world. And so that's kind of like how we backed into doing fitness games, even though, again, it's not how we imagined, not in a bad way. It's not why we set up the company.
Did you ever play the electronic arts game Majestic? Are you familiar with it?
I'm very familiar. Because it came out not long around when I was kind of
2001 is when it originally debuted. I didn't actually have a chance to play it, but I remember reading the ads and like reading about it, and it's like I didn't have a BlackBerry or a fax machine, but like all those things were involved. But it's one of the earliest examples of like, essentially what would become more popularized as ARGs, but certainly as there's like mixed media, like physical, real world, digital storytelling. It was really ahead of its time, even though it was kind of laughed at when EA took the risk on it in 2001.
It was a really cool idea. This is back when EA was doing really kind of innovative stuff. They spent a lot of money on it, I remember. There were two challenges. One was that it was kind of quite expensive, actually, because I think it had like a monthly subscription as well.
Yeah.
Back when like people wanted to do like World of Warcraft stuff. But I think the other issue, which I kind of made fun at the time, I thought was an excuse, but I think it probably is true, is that 9/11 happened like not long after Majestic or around the time Majestic came out, and people maybe just weren't in the mood to play a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, July 24th is when it launches, and then obviously soon after. And if you're running something over the course of a season, the real world is gonna interact with it.
Yeah.
So I had originally chatted with you over Zombies Run, and the reason I was interested in back in 2014 when I worked at the website Giant Bomb was because that was roughly lines up with my own personal journey with fitness. My wife has a family history with running. She started kind of getting into running, and my family has a long history of the men dying of heart disease at early ages. And so it was sort of impressed upon me at an early age that the earlier you can get into some form of physical fitness, the easier it's going to be, especially as you get older. And I tried a couple different things, not much stuck or was hard to stick, but running, for whatever reason, seemed to come kind of easy, and it didn't drive me up a wall. And over time, sort of kind of like looked forward to doing it, like realized how good it could make me feel. And part of that journey was figuring out, what the hell do I do while I'm running? Like, some people want to be with their thoughts. Some people, this is like that era is like early in podcasts and stuff like that, as formalized as it is now. And I ended up wanting to chat with you about Zombies Run way back when, because it was part of that shuffle of what is the hook? Like, what gets me out and able to push past, getting your heart rate up for 10 minutes. What is your own personal history with fitness? Like, where does it come into, like, this is something I need to do, and then obviously it eventually leads to working on something in software, but like over like the course of your life, like, what is your own history with fitness?
Yeah, at school we were basically made to do cross-country running, and it was extremely painful and I was not very good at it, and so that kind of put me off running. But then when I was at university, it was in this beautiful place, and it was very good for running. So I started running, and I got myself a Garmin Forerunner 201, which was like one of the first kind of fitness GPS trackers.
Yeah,
looks like a brick on your arm. And so I sort of proto-gamified like running for myself, just by like wanting to beat my kind of ghost runner, because it did have like a ghost runner mode where you could
interesting,
compete against yourself. Yeah, and that was pretty motivating, for me at the time, because I was like, I can see how I'm improving like every day, every week. But then there actually came a moment, like 6 months in or a year in, where the ghost runner started beating me. And I was just like, this is just really depressing. Like, I'm just getting worse, and like, why should I keep doing this? And so eventually I stopped tracking it in that way because it just wasn't motivating. And I think for me, that was like a moment where there was a kind of dual realization. One is, hey, we can make running and we can make exercise more interesting through, games, through gamification. But I think just relying on this idea of kind of performance metrics, of leaderboards, it can get you some of the way there. And some people love that. I mean, that's what Peloton is all about. But it is not a great long-term solution. And for some people, they don't like it at all. And so it's really just that taught me, just for myself, that you've got to look at richer, different kinds of motivation.
And so we're here to chat because you have a new collaboration with Marvel, a sort of a successor to Zombies Run. But to build up to that, like, was there a moment when you knew you were onto something with Zombies Run, whether it was something like your own personal motivation or you handed an early prototype to someone? Like, when did you realize, like, oh, the notion thematically of running from zombies, this like storytelling, sort of like overarching hook, like this is something, like we can build something around this? Like, when did it finally kind of like stick as, hey, we're onto something?
I mean, I'm going to say 3 moments if I can. Mm-hmm. The first one was when I was coming up with the idea with our co-creator, Naomi Alderman, and she's an amazing novelist. She has this new TV show out, which you might have heard, called The Power. And we were talking about making like a running game. And she said, how about zombies? I'm sick of zombies, like we've already had The Walking Dead. We had 28 Days Later, like overdone.
That was kind of in the thick of like the rise of zombie fiction, which is funny that The Walking Dead only recently went off the air, which goes to tell you how long the tail can be on those things.
It's lasted so long that we've gone all the way around, wrapped all the way around to The Last of Us now.
Right.
Zombies are hot again. So but we were talking about, I was like, you know what? The thing is, even though I'm done with zombies, it makes so much sense that this is the one circumstance where you as a player would conceivably be running so much, like, because there's no cars, there's no fuel, there's no, the roads are blocked, that sort of thing. You need to go and get supplies. It's a great story engine. There's a lot of missions we can take people on. And it's audio based because when you're running, you can't, you've got like a radio operator. It all made a lot of sense. And then the second moment was when we did the Kickstarter, and that was really successful and just like became the biggest video game Kickstarter of all time at that time. And then it got eclipsed by Double Fine.
There was that era where it was like every new Kickstarter from a new old studio or old developer suddenly was the biggest Kickstarter of all time.
That was a golden age for Kickstarter video games. But actually, I think the main moment where I realized, I think this is going to work is when I got a demo. I got sort of an alpha build on my iPhone. And it was from the second mission, which was called Distraction. And basically at the start of this, you hear like on the intercom through your headphones, it's like, our base gates have stuck in the open position. There are zombies inbound. We need, runners 3, 4, 5, and 8 to get out on distraction duty. Go, go, go. And the sirens blaring. And I'd listened to this mission like 3 or 4 times. I was just like, I just need to run. Like I'm hearing it, and I just feel compelled to run. And I've read the script. I've seen this in production, and yet I still feel it. And that to me is where I realized, okay, this, of course, the audio storytelling is so intimate. And, when you're in this kind of frame of mind where like you're already prepared to run, you've got your trainers on, you've got a t-shirt on, it actually worked really well. And so when you threw in things like, the zombie chasers and stuff, it was like, it sounds like it wouldn't work, or it sounds like it would get boring pretty quickly. And yet, even for me, it worked really well. And so that was when, I feel like we got something.
That game launches several years, which is hard to imagine now, given sort of like the way I think people's personal relationship with fitness has developed over the last 10 years, but it's pre-Apple Watch, right? Like you have Fitbits, you have Garmin's, you're starting to see people doing the, steps sort of stuff, but I feel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels very much like the Apple Watch sort of like creates this inflection point into the mass market of like people having a new relationship between what are they doing daily and how does that interact with sort of their physical movement. And the Apple Watch and the Rings concept very specifically sort of popularizing for a lot of people, like how do I conceptualize a day and like what is a goal, especially when it is disconnected from necessarily doing a run or like a hit workout, like something that's a little more concrete. It's more just like, what am I doing throughout the day? And so Zombies Run is conceived and launches ahead of the real mainstreaming of sort of like devices on our wrists, where we're like much more self-conscious day to day of our bodies and what we have, or as they constantly ping us, have not done. I really like it every time the Apple Watch says that you haven't stood in a while. And it's like, I'm aware, Apple Watch, fully aware that I've been doing a podcast for 4 hours and I haven't stood up. But I like that. It's a huge, like, I found the watch more than any real device, like, to transform my relationship with my own body in a way that I've always really appreciated. But your game has existed and evolved alongside that. And so I'm curious, what has that been like to watch these devices just go everywhere and be around everyone? Because in the beginning, like, I was doing Zombies Run just, my phone in my pocket with my earbuds in. Like, I didn't have a fitness tracker. I was using like Runkeeper and other like popular apps at the time.
Yeah, I mean, we got in there just a year or two after the App Store launched to third parties. And, when we started, it was just really unusual to have like new apps at all. People were just excited by new apps launching. Now no one cares.
I used to every day wake up and be like, what are the new patches? Like, I was excited for patch notes on like now I've got 6 screens full of junk that I'm like barely paying attention to. But I used to be like, dang, like the Facebook app got updated. What did they add?
I think what was exciting back then was that every year the capabilities of smartphones just jumped so far. And when we started, there was no idea that you could have like cellular connectivity because people didn't even necessarily have 3G. The phones were slow. You couldn't rely on them working in the background if you had the screen off, all this sort of thing. People didn't have music as much. And then, with the Apple Watch, with like AirPods even, it's just become more, it's become much easier for people to have a good experience with things like Zombies Run. But also it meant that there's been like a ton of competition, and just the entire market has completely changed. Back when we launched Zombies Run, it cost $8 to buy. I mean, imagine trying to go and launch an app now that costs $8. I mean, people thought we were absolutely deranged when we launched. I thought, you can't sell that for $8. And then we had to discount it. And then, like a few years after we launched, we made it free to play, and then we added a subscription.
Right.
And we had
the arc of any app on the App Store that was there early is discounted, and then how do we do some sort of subscription model that makes this make sense?
Well, and so that's where it kind of ties into the fitness aspect, because I think that people still, and I get this, although I think there are reasons for it, people get very upset when their favorite app turns of subscription. People get upset with ours as well, but probably not as upset as other companies, because I think people people compare Zombies Run to a gym membership or to other digital fitness memberships, and they are subscription based. And the reason they're subscription based is because they keep on adding new content, and there's a lot of server functionality, which is the same for us. And so, when we went to subscription, it was almost kind of committing ourselves to, we're just going to keep supporting this app forever. Basically, we can't abandon it now. Like, we have people paying us, every month, every year, and so we are going to keep improving it. And that's just hard because it's such a moving target. Every year, Apple and Google break half the stuff in iOS and Android, and so just trying to keep up with that is a difficult thing. Every year, there's a new health kit change. There's the Apple Watch. People want it to support these different things, and so, I mean, in some ways, it's a great problem to have because it exposes you to this massive market, and we are able to do things we couldn't do before. On the other hand, it's just people talk a lot about live games these days, games as a service. And it's like, we've been doing that for so long.
You just accidentally backed into it, as opposed to so many companies are chasing that now. It's like, if you can hit on one of these 10 games that people want to play every day or every month or every year, it's like you can make just so much more money. But becoming part of people's daily habits is extremely hard, because it means they have to take something off the shelf. Like, I've got my habits. This is what I do. okay, well, if I'm going to fit this here, well, this one's got to come down. It's rare that we're expanding the cabinet of our habits. It's more that we sacrifice something else and hopefully it fits. And I imagine that's the sort of stickiness that you must have in people's lives is, and it's the way I feel about my watch or other things that are fitness related is like, yeah, like this is part of me now. And giving that up would be difficult.
Well, I never thought we'd be making zombies run for like a decade.
You are like The Walking Dead now, right? Like if that was also show went on for a decade. And the nice part about zombie fiction is that there are always ways that you can keep extending out how that story works.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of room in the apocalypse. But, I thought we'd make it for 1 or 2 or 3 years and then we just go make another game. And I think the reason why we ended up working on it for so long is for what you said there, is that people turned it into a habit. They actually came to rely on it, and we will get emails and messages from people saying, your game has transformed my fitness. I use it every day, every week. It's really helped me get fit. And it's one thing to have people email you saying they really enjoyed their game. We get those, and we got those for other games. But when people say, actually, this has really been important for my health and I hope you keep going, it's a bit of pressure, clearly, but it's also just like, it is nice to work on something where it's really important to people, right? And that doesn't mean, I like making games that are just fun, don't get me wrong, but it's also nice to think, wow, like we're doing something quite hard here. It is actually really hard to make a fun fitness game. It's much easier to just make a fun game, really, and trying, because most people just prefer to sit down on the sofa, and not run. Like, it is easier to do that.
Me included. I primarily, my exercise is running, and I still agree with that sentiment.
but that is a huge motivator for us to hear from people, oh, this is actually making a difference. And so that's why we're doing it. And I think when we realize that, the story is such a big driver, then, and we sort of introduce a subscription that, allowed us to kind of really figure out, okay, what we can do here is we can just keep on adding more stories, and we can gradually build up the features and add different kind of like running types and tracking types and workout types. So we do home workouts and good support for differently able people to try and sort of make it more broad. But yeah, it's really just about like, how can we make this entertaining for people for years?
So, this game takes off, becomes part of people's lives, and you obviously start, continue making it long after you sort of expected. But the reason we're chatting at all is because not, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Zombies Run or anything. It's because now you are actually making a new fitness game, a collaboration with Marvel. What's called Marvel Move. What's the high level pitch? Like, what is Marvel Move?
Marvel Move, it's basically a way to make exercise more fun. So if you have ever wanted to walk, jog, or run a little bit more, or just be a little bit more motivated and make it a little bit more exciting, then we put you into this kind of immersive audio adventure where you are being trained by Thor and Loki across, the Asgardian 10 worlds, or you are being a spy with Daredevil, or you are joining the X-Men, and you go on these missions, you go on these workouts with these superheroes who you are, hopefully know and love from the comics and the movies. And, they will go and tell you, like, we've got a job for you now. You've got to go and rescue these mutants from the Sentinels who've been stranded out there. And we turn it into this really immersive experience that we think is just going to get people really excited and excited to get up on a rainy Sunday morning when they'd rather stay in bed. Hopefully they'll be like, oh wow, like I really want to find out what happens next, and I want to go and build up my collection of trophies and figure out what's going on in this mystery.
When you got a chance to work on a new project where, you work with the license, so I'm sure there's, restrictions and things that come with working, with existing characters, working within an existing company. But, it's in many ways a chance to start from ground zero all over again with lessons learned. And I'm sure you're incorporating a Zombies Run, but you have kind of your box that you're in terms of like what the fans expect, like what their experience is like. What did you take away into building out with this experience that was going to be like that took lessons from from Zombies Run that you were like, finally, like, we have somewhere else to implement these ideas?
Well, I mean, so the first thing to say is that Zombies Run is still continuing, because like we've got a lot of players there. But one of the great advantages and one of the great limitations of Zombies Run is in its title, which is to say it's about zombies. And there are a lot of people who like zombies, and there's probably even more people who don't like zombies. They just hear the word zombies and they think, oh, I don't like. I think it's going to be too scary, or I think it's going to be silly. It's just for kids, that sort of thing. And the advantage that we had from having the Marvel toy box open to us is we can tell these different kinds of stories with different kind of characters who people already have a knowledge of and relationship with. So, if we have a series, like a training series with Thor and Loki, then people already know that's going to be a fun time. They know if it's going to be for them. Or if we do a story with, the Hulk, they know it's going to be a different kind of story. And so we're able to use, people's, affinity and knowledge of these characters, to get people into the action a bit faster. So that's kind of one big thing. And so it allows us, we're launching with like a bunch of different stories. And it means that even if you're like, you know what, like I'm more of an X-Men person than I am a Daredevil person, then there is something there for you. Now, that obviously does mean that we have more stories that we have to go and make. And so that's a challenge. But it's a good place to be. And we've been able to work with some really good writers on this. So I think that we've also learned a lot with just like, how do you tell a story where the user, the runner is meant to be running all the time? Like that's actually surprisingly difficult. How do you sort of keep people motivated? People have tried to do things like Zombies Run before. There are a bunch of competitors out there, and it's like, it often ends up being surprisingly boring. And so we think we've made something that is just like really fun. And that's what I like to see and read and listen to, is just like, can we make something that's really fun and really exciting, that feels like you're in a really great thriller or action movie, and where it's important that you are running and moving. So that's a big part of it. Another big part is we're really sort of leaning quite hard on the sort of world expanding aspects of Marvel Move. So after you've completed a run, you will get an email from characters sort of giving you a bit more of the story, telling you, what you've done. You can learn a bit more about the world through collectibles, through trophies, through all sorts of things that you sort of collect. So it's not just like you're listening to an audiobook. It is interactive. You'll get chased by enemies when you're running, so you need to go and run a bit faster. Sentinels, monsters, all sorts of things. So it is this kind of mix of gamification and storytelling and fitness, which is still pretty rare. There's not many people who do this sort of thing. It's kind of a weird combination. But yeah, I don't know, Marvel, it's fun. And yeah, it's just the right vibe, I think.
You with Zombies Run, that's sort of at the height of like zombies in pop culture, and partnering with Marvel. Like obviously there are very few things bigger than the MCU at the moment. Like Marvel comics have always been a thing, but the advent of the MCU really takes it to another level in terms of sort of like mainstream understanding and appreciation of these characters. And you mentioned, the term gamification. And although, licensing with Marvel may not be explicitly what we've bucket under gamification, but it is under the wider bucket of like, what are people interested in? What are motivating factors to get them interested in doing a thing? And I'm curious, as someone that has essentially made a thing across, like, I don't know, like as the term gamification was, I feel like maybe it's not, 2012, but it's around that era that I feel like that it was everywhere. And I feel like it's fun, maybe design wise, less out of favor, but in terms of it being a term that I'm hearing all the time, I'm not hearing it as much these days, at least in my circles. I'm just in that broader sort of idea of hooks, gamification, however you want to like actually sort of name all that, finding these motivating factors for players. Like, where do you stand on that now, having like gone through getting ready to launch the second project?
I mean, I think most of what you hear that is called gamification is really bad and either doesn't work or is just really lazily designed or is actively manipulative. So, I think that and so I think these days when people say something is gamified, they usually mean it's kind of done. It's got some points and it's got some badges, and it's not necessarily a good game. It's not necessarily fun, but it has those things. But and so like we used to get, and we still do get invited to a lot of gamification conferences, because people think Zombies Run is a really good example of gamification. But we don't think of Zombies Run as gamification. We just call it a running game, and because it hopefully it's fun enough and different enough and interactive enough to feel like that. So I am a big believer in good gamification. Actually, I think it's really cool that you have things like Rocksmith Plus, that turn learning the guitar into playing a game. I think that there are really cool things like Kerbal Space Program, which work well. The challenge is it's just really hard to do it well, right? Just from a technical point of view, from a game design point of view, you're trying to make someone do something that is quite hard, right? It's not easy to learn the guitar, and a game can make it slightly easier, but it still involves a lot of dexterity and a lot of preparing, and so I wish there was 10 times as much gamification out there as there is now, but I wish it was good gamification. And I think that and I think actually the market rewards that, but it's just, it's a design challenge. And I sort of don't blame game designers for being like, you know what, I'll just make something that's fun, because it's easier to raise money and it's kind of a bit easier to do that. But I think it's just really rewarding to do something that's different. So all of that is to say, for sure, I think gamification has gone through this hype cycle, and it's probably not the high point of the hype cycle. I think a lot of people are a bit more skeptical of it. At the same time, I think it's still really nice it's really important to say that what are people having trouble with that they really want to do that is good for them, right? Learning a language, getting fit, learning an instrument. Can we help them through a game? And if we can, let's do that. And if there's a story that can do that, let's do that. We're working with Marvel because it's something I think that this will expose people to this kind of experience who might not have considered it before, right? I think there are probably a lot of people out there who, if I could force them to play Zombies Run, maybe they would like it. I just think they would hear Zombies Run and think, I don't know about that. But if they hear Marvel Move, oh yeah, I like Marvel. That's a fun time. I can see how that works. I would love to learn how to run a 5K with Thor and Loki. Then I think that's where it works.
What do you think is that line between incentive and exploitation? Because it sounds like it's something you've given a lot of thought as you've worked in trying to design these types of systems, and where that line might fall.
Well, this is a really kind of interesting thing where basically the same system can start out being motivating and incentivizing behavior, and then without any changes become manipulative. So, for example, a lot of gig economy apps, for taxis and for food delivery, include gamification for workers. So, when you're on your first job, it'll be like, hey, congratulations for completing your first mission, delivering this, Chinese takeout. Here's 50 points. You've leveled up to level 3, confetti everywhere. Begin your next quest now. And people will actually say, oh, that was really motivating, and it was kind of really exciting, and I felt like I was playing this amazing game. And then they'll say, and 6 months later, I felt like I was being manipulated by exactly the same game, because it was saying, oh, if you want to go maintain your level 10 status, and if you want to go and level up and get on the leaderboard and not slip down and win this award, you need to do 500 more tasks this week, and you just feel crushed by it. So it is, that's a kind of interesting thing where the same thing can be welcomed and can be motivating for beginners and can end up feeling really crushing and abusive, by the end. And so, I would never say, well, let's ban all gamification or even regulate all gamification, but I would say it's really easy actually to manipulate workers or vulnerable people to doing stuff which they probably don't want to do. I was talking to an Uber driver about it. I I was researching a book, and I was talking about these Uber quests.
Mm-hmm.
So they're literally called quests, and they're offered to drivers. And the idea is if you complete a certain number of trips in a certain time period, you get a bonus. And I said, hey, these quests, surely, don't you like them though? Because you get extra money. And he was like, yeah, you get extra money, but I just get really tired and I don't want to drive that much. It's just not worth it to them. But they kind of feel like they have to. And of course, you could say, well, just don't do it then. But it's like, wow, yeah, but it's a quest, and I feel like I should, because that's how it's designed. And people have grown up playing video games for the last 30 years, and they know that they're meant to complete quests. So it's a really interesting kind of interplay. It's not video games' fault. This is just something that people have grown up associating stuff from video games with positive things. And that's what bad gamification is taking advantage of.
Yeah, the term quest, that makes me feel a little gross. Because you're specifically plucking the types of adventure congratulatory terminology that games deploy. And certainly there can be exploitative games, free to play, gotcha stuff. There games are hardly error free in this realm. But boy, seeing that terminology just kind of dropped in there, just sort of that was researched in a way that I don't know that was necessarily for the best intentions of the people that it's being deployed to.
Yeah.
So one practically speaking, when you're building these games, all games, even if it's sort of narrative focused, need a QA. And so I assume your studio is big enough now that every time you need to QA test or try a new script, you are not strapping on your running shoes to go try it out. But what is the QA and evolution process of these scripts and the software, given that I'm not trying to say sitting down in front of a monitor, it doesn't require effort. I do it all day and it's tiring, but getting out and running, 2 miles to make sure this script feels right and to send notes is a slightly different ask.
I used to do it a lot for a surprisingly long time because I was kind of main runner in the company. We added in a lot of debugging modes into the app and that, to sort of simulate runs and simulate GPS. And so it is possible for our QA team to just go and sit down and see the person run around the map and make sure things work from a technical point of view. I think that after the first few years, we figured out how a story should feel, how a workout should feel, how a mission feel, and how long it should last. But, the other thing that we figured out is that people actually really like different things, unsurprisingly. And so some people wanted to do multiple missions in a single long run. And other people wanted to just do half a mission in one run. I mean, just completely different experiences, right? And, I sort of just realized the way to accommodate this is just to give people as many options as possible. And so if people want to go and do a really short run and just blast through the story and blast through the game as fast as possible, be our guest. We're going to make that as good as possible as we can for you. Or if people want to, stretch it out for as long as possible, and they're going to do there are people who do marathons and ultra marathons with our game, and we're we're going to try and make that work as well as.
Where they'll listen to during an ultra. Oh my. I assume that's a use case you had not necessarily conceptualized when Zombies Run started. Was how do we stretch this out over multiple hours? I mean,
it's an interesting one where I think people I think ultramarathoners realize that they don't have a sort of typical use case. We really appreciate the fact that it just works full stop, and so to the extent that we can, we're we have some really long stories for the people who want to do that. We have half marathon distance stories, and we have some really long stories which you can play back to back. We have this thing called radio mode, which is also in Marvel Move, which basically we designed right from the start to accommodate the fact that we don't really know how long people are going to run for. And actually, runners don't know how long they're going to run for. Mm-hmm. You might think that, I'm just going to do 30 minutes or I'm going to do 5K. And then you get to the end of that. You're I feel great. I just want to keep on running. But it will be annoying if you have to stop and you have to mess around with your phone. So by default, the app will move into radio mode and you get what sounds like a sort of like typical kind of like post-apocalyptic radio, or of course radio that makes sense in the Marvel move story that you're doing. And it's a bit like the GTA radio would be a good sort of comparison, where it's sort of unlimited and it keeps you company, and it fits into the story. So those are kind of like some small things that we did just to make sure, all right, it doesn't really matter who you are. We're going to try and make this as good as we can. It's not really possible, like from a kind of resources point of view, to make like stories for every single length of run. I think people could try, but I'm not sure that would work.
No, I mean, I experienced I experienced that myself. Like, I have like 2 different versions of, like I live in a suburb, and so like I have pretty set paths that like I go on. And it's like, well, all right, today I think I'm going to do the 2.6 mile, but I have an option of like, well, if I'm feeling really good on like that last turn, because maybe, well, in the winter, I don't run as much because I really hate treadmills, and so I usually reserve that for the spring, summer, and fall. So when I'm gearing up to get back into sort of like running shape, I'm rarely going past the 2.6. It's like I've got that loop, but then, once I've gotten to the rhythm of it and I can feel my body kind of like getting more adjusted, it's like, well, I have like an extra mile and a half, depending on which route I want to go, that I can just lop onto that, and I know exactly what that route's going to be. I can tell my wife exactly how long I'm going to be gone, so that like I'm not away from the kids for too long. But I absolutely understand what you're talking about, where it's like sometimes in real time you're making those adjustments, especially if you're used to the repetition of doing a sort of a set route over and over. You kind of construct your own ways through it.
I think that's a really important observation as well, because there are other running games and other sort of location-based games, obviously Pokemon Go, where you are looking at a map as you're playing, and you sort of figure out where to go turn by turn. And look, you're a runner, you kind of know that is kind of the last thing you want when you're running, because it's not really very safe, or kind of it just breaks you out of flow if you're just having to look at your phone all the time. A lot of runners, most runners, I think, have just a few different routes that they want to do. I've got the 5K route, I've got the 10K route, I can do that twice or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they want it to be a little bit more interesting than just listening to an audiobook or music. And so, okay, how can we do that with the technology that people have without asking people to change their habits too much? Right. It is actually a big ask to sort of get people to do anything different. And so how can we make that feel as normal as possible?
All right. Well, Adrian, I really appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to checking this out. When can people check it out? What else do you want to tell us about Marvel Move before we get out of here?
Yeah, it is coming out this summer. You can check it out at marvelmove.app. Just search Marvel Move. We have a special Founders Club thing. You get 30% off. So it's a 2 years membership for like $100. Super exciting. I don't know. We've been working on it for a long time. We've been talking to Marvel for so many years about this. Just trying to make this work. You can imagine how difficult it is to convince everyone that this is a good idea. So it's just cool. I think we've done a good job on it.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out, and I'm always looking for something else to do on that 2.67. Like, I have it down to the second decimal point. And I was like, if I follow the exact sidewalks I normally do, it's like, so I'm always looking for a non-podcast thing to do on that. So I appreciate the time, and congrats on being able to finally announce it after, I'm sure, a number of years of working on it. And hopefully we'll get to chat soon.
Brilliant. Thanks.
We're back. And we have some news to get into. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about Nintendo putting someone into indentured servitude?
Gary Bowser, which is easy to confuse.
There are two Bowsers.
Gary Bowser.
Three
Bowsers, yeah.
Yeah,
Gary Bowser, Greg Bowser, and Bowser.
I guess the Koopalings, I guess they technically would have the last name Bowser.
Yeah,
like,
but nobody knows
the naming conventions work that way. But Doug Bowser is the president of Nintendo. Gary Bowser is he was formerly a member of the Team Executor modding group that focused on the Switch. He was part of a series of arrests related to that group. Nintendo and the Department of Justice were involved. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison, and as part of he's now gets a chance to go back to Canada, but he essentially owes Nintendo $14.5 million as a result of this whole ordeal. He did an interview recently with Nick Moses, O5, gaming podcast, in which he had spent 16 months in prison and then was discharged for good behavior, is now being and will be sent back to Canada sometime soon. During the time that he was in prison, he was able to work sort of a job that didn't earn a lot of money, but in theory could go towards the money that is owed. Bowser apparently told Moses that he paid $175 of that during his stint. And going forward, Nintendo is allowed to garnish his wages 25 to 30% of his gross monthly income, and has about 6 months after release in which before the payments will spin up again. And yeah, that seems awful.
It's fucking evil.
The man has gone to prison. I understand that they came at a number and he, agreed to it, as part of, that whole process. But the notion that $14.5 million can't just stand as some sort of like, this is the number we arrived at, but actually we're going to garnish his wages for, this is not a teenager.
Right.
I forget how old he is, but he is like in his 40s, at least 50s. Like he's going to die owing Nintendo millions of dollars. And I just don't, I understand how this happens because you got to make a point out of someone to deter, that is the operating theory here. But this is unusually cruel punishment to someone who like the crime does not fit the punishment here, especially given somebody's what they're going to deal with for the rest of their lives.
I mean, this is Rob, not only will he die with this debt unpaid, but like there is a chance that like the economic devastation, financial devastation this will rack upon him could kill him. These actions have consequences. If you're talking about 30% of your wages being garnished and like not the word I actually meant to say, but you're talking about 30% of your wages just gone, and you have a like former prison sentence, the jobs you are going to have access to, having 30% of that money taken away is going to be putting you like significantly below the poverty line.
Yeah, I don't know how. I'm trying to think now how it works. I don't know. Both scenarios are bad, but like, does the garnishment happen before tax is calculated? So you're not, you know what I mean? Like, if it is, you're paid a certain amount, you're taxed on that certain amount, and then 30% of what would have been your take home gets taken. That is even more brutal, right?
I bet it's that. That is
so in one way or the other, like the career prospects of somebody in their 50s, with a convicted felon, like a pre-tax or post-tax. I mean, you're right. Like it has an impact, but at the end of the day, like you're severe. I mean, like someone can make, $60,000 and, you're cutting them down to 45. Like that is a hugely consequential impact on a person's ability to operate independently, right? Like what has happened here is as a result of this, the story on Ars Technica, points out that they're going to be, released to their family, but it's like, you're going to spend the rest of your life then burdened to your family and the community around you. If you're fortunate enough to have that, that's awful. Like it's not just him that is burdened with this. Like it is everyone around him that then has to deal with the consequences of something that is not like, hey, for the next 5 years, I think, your wages, some percentage is going to Nintendo, and then it'll lift, this is until you can quote pay it off. Like it's ridiculous. Like I understand extending, even if I disagree with it, like the notion that it can't just be, hey, for a little while, like this, there's going to be a lingering, like you were discharged with good behavior, but like, hey, for a period, you're going to contribute to this fine that we arrived at. But the notion that it goes for the rest of your life is just incredibly hard to wrap your head around as being something that is going to deter people from pirating Switch games.
Yeah, I mean, like the other thing is that like, how much money did he make in the 7 years he spent there?
Yeah,
$320,000.
Yeah.
A couple hundred thousand. Yeah, I mean, the operation generated a lot more. Currently, the person that is thought to have earned the most lives in France, but hasn't been successfully extradited. The most of the money went through this individual, and there's at least at this stage, a half decent shot that person goes, does not see a courtroom, and that you have, and which is probably why someone like.
I mean, this is what's
Bowser.
happening. I'm not seeing a fucking courtroom for this. Are you kidding? Like, I'm looking up what, like, I am going to evade these legal proceedings as long as possible.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shockingly disproportionate thing, and like I think part of it also is like it is clear the courts are taking the always like inflated bullshit estimates that industry releases for like here's what piracy costs us, which is always based on
there's a note here in the article that says the DOJ, relying on Nintendo's assertions of market losses to piracy, had originally pushed for a 60-month sentence. He was sentenced for 40, but like that deference to, well, what do you think? How much were you harmed? Do you think is not how I would want the system to arrive at its punishment, like erring to the side of the company judging. I don't know. What's my pain level today?
Yeah.
How's it feel?
Well, especially because the industry has always sort of like approached the piracy discussion with the obviously like bullshit assertion that like a pirated piece of media equals a lost sale, which is just like
Absolutely
never the
not
case.
true.
Wildly disproven.
So
like,
fucking
it's
dumb.
Just it's not how it works. It's easy to see how that lie slips through because like psychologically it makes sense, right? Like if you were to tell someone that like, oh, if you pirate something, it's a lost sale. Like I see how you could go, oh yeah, I guess I see that. But then you spend any time around people, I mean, Netflix going through its password sharing, Love is sharing a password. Now we're going to claw that shit back. I mean, like it is just, that is not how the real world works and how people interact with media.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fucking quote Foucault. I'm not doing this. But know that I almost did.
Wow. Restraint. Growth.
Thank you.
Well, the other thing is like, I don't know much about what I don't know very much what Team Executor was doing, right? Like what were they selling, right? Because like there's kind of two, like there's things you can get like where it's I want to make pirating current games easier, and then there's ways to make devices just do things that the manufacturer didn't originally support, or to play backwards compatible things on them, right? Like
so according to the Ars Technica piece, the group developed and sold jailbreaking devices dating back to the original Xbox under various brand and release names. While these devices opened up systems for homebrew, Linux, and other uses, they also made it simple to load pirated ROMs onto devices. Team Executor benefited from the open source work of Switch hackers, sold devices at profit to help others hack their Switches, and were far more explicit about the piracy aspects of their exploits than other groups. And I think that is, from what I've read about the group, that's a bit of why, like, the book was thrown at them here, like, by Nintendo, was like, hey, we all understand you Google, like, ROMs, you can find it. I mean, they play whack-a-mole with those websites, but, like, you can find stuff, but you gotta do a little digging. It sounds like this group was blatantly, like, raising their hands and going, not homebrew, how about home version of Zelda for $0, sort of thing. And it has to be stated that the Switch has been like really uncorked. Like piracy is a huge problem on that platform, to the point that Nintendo changed the way they did like distribution of review copies of their game, because I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I presume that there was some speculation on their part that some games getting out early was happening, like, through the review distribution process and then loaded onto launch era Switches, which are notoriously easy to get into. And so, I mean, do I think Nintendo has lost a shitload of money to piracy? Like, yeah. But I think we can all agree, like, landing at this on this one guy,
economically executing a 50-year-old is not the
yeah. Especially because he's he described himself, or I don't know if this was from the the actual proceedings or how Bowser described themselves, but essentially he was a PR person, he was a marketing person.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't making the devices, wasn't distributing them. Maybe he was responsible for some of the.
But you're the one we caught. You're the one we got.
You're the one he caught,
Yeah.
right? That's. I mean that is at the end of the day. I think the long and short of it is, hey, the person who was really responsible for the behavior that might have resulted in a financial loss may never see a courtroom, whether you agree whether they should or not. That the person who at least bears more responsibility for the consequences of this group is not the person who is going to be spending the rest of their life paying off a debt that seems woefully unfair.
Yeah, it's
and they got them for like, I'm trying to like double check, but it looks like a lot of the charges are like not about the specifics of what they were doing, but how they were moving money around, like not even committing wire fraud, but conspiracy to commit wire fraud, which is also like, wait, what? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, especially in like the federal code, there are a lot of ways to make cases for like not even like well-defined crimes, but like activities when you can't make the main case of like the clear crime.
Yeah.
And so this is like pretty standard operating procedure for how like federal prosecutors just roll.
Well, and just looking at like this, some of these reading some of these previous stories that Ars Technica has done on similar sort of things. This is from a different piece by Kyle Orland. Bowser's sentence is significantly longer than that for Mega Upload programmer Andres Nome, boy, who has not grabbed something from Mega Upload over the years, who faced a sentence of a year and a day after pleading guilty in 2015 to copyright infringement amounting to $400 million over 5 years. How exactly you arrive at that calculation, I don't know. But in this piece, there's some quotes from the federal prosecutors who said, quote, the sentence and the severity of it would, quote, send a message that there are consequences for participating in a sustained effort to undermine the video game industry. Any sentence imposed in this case will be widely disseminated within the video gaming community, as this case is being watched closely by the industry. I mean, that really... That just sends the just incredibly gross message that, I mean, we know we don't have to do this. This is not, like, this does not fit what this person did. We just want to scare the rest of you into thinking this could be you. And that is just so profoundly unfair to the individual in question. There have to be more effective ways to communicate, please don't do this, than...
Well, especially because it's never applied. Like, you don't see exemplary punishment of like CEOs. Like, you just don't, like, that never happens.
No.
Well, no, because
like federal prosecutors don't like throw the book at people like that. So yeah,
I lied previously. Just because it's useful here, the public execution then has a juro-political function. Its aim is not so much as to reestablish a balance as to bring into play as its extreme point the dissymmetry between the subject who has dared to violate the law and the all-powerful sovereign who displays his strength. In this situation, right, it is the same like function of the like effectively public execution happening through economic means at the hands of a corporation acting as an all-powerful sovereign.
That's discipline and punish, right?
Yes, that is discipline and punish.
Yeah, and I think the thing Foucault could not have anticipated was the fact that the agents of the state would be applying for jobs with the private entities that the state is protecting. I think that's also a part of it too, where it's like a lot of your federal prosecutors are also going to be like, well, did my time, burnish that resume, and now it's time for corporate law, baby. How can I subvert and twist this from the other side? So like that's another thing to bear in mind is a lot of people on the litigation side of state and federal like attorneys' offices are in the midst of an extended audition and also like sort of a pre-employment service period for corporate law.
let me perform cruelty to fillet the 30 most evil people in the fucking world. Yeah. Like, it sucks. I hate it so much.
We can't help but look at stuff like this and then see what happened with, like, the Sackler family, right? Like, chiefly responsible for the modern opioid crisis, settles for $6 billion, no jail time.
Also, that money largely isn't recouped, right? Well, no, they did settle.
I actually think they moved a ton of their assets
like out from Purdue Pharma.
Yeah, they did hit them, like, but it's not a jail cell, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just they'll be fine. Like, it's, same way with the Fox News settlement with Dominion this week. Like, sure, yeah, it's a hit. Like, you landed a punch, but there is power in that image of powerful people actually, whatever you think of the carceral state, like, being put in that place, and they never do. They never will. And yet this guy got his hand caught in the cookie jar, and bye-bye. Sucks.
So, actually, do you think there's utility in bearing that in mind as we turn to, like, people are asking if we're going to stream it, etc. Nintendo just had an indie direct. And having contemplated
now that sweet content on my Switch,
and it's the cutest platform, and
it's adorable.
Yeah, so they have their Nintendo Indie Direct. I'm curious if anything jumped out at you.
There's nothing huge. There were a couple games that got release dates that are, like, worth noting. I quite liked the original Oxenfree. That game is the sequel now has a release date on July 12th. Yes. I think when we talked about Netflix recently in regards to Joseph Staten, that you can play that game through your Netflix app. If you've not played Oxenfree, you should. That game's good. Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, the Jet Set Radio inspired game, got a release date August 18th. That game looks sick, and I'm excited for that to come out. Blasphemous 2, Waypoint's Game of the Generation. You just, like, unanimously voted. If you've not played Blasphemous, it is a fucking awesome. You can call it Souls inspired. I think it's more Castlevania than it is Souls, but it certainly has. It's got the checkpointy stuff like Souls and all that. But I would put it more in the Castlevania camp than anything else, and it's just this really incredible, like, Spanish aesthetic. Like, it's just fucking is great. And the sequel is announced, but it is coming sometime this summer, late summer, which is sooner than I would have expected. And in the pre-show, Ren, you had mentioned you have been kind of picking at it a little bit because we were both taken by some of the. They didn't really spell out what's changing in the combat in this one, but it was hard not to notice, like, a lot of defensive posture stuff in here with the main character, like, blocking and then being pushed back by an enemy without being clear. Like, the UI wasn't communicating what's happening there.
One thing that I would really love to see is, like, a version of Blasphemous that, like, just doubly commits to both sides of itself. That seems to be what we might be getting here, because, like, the platforming Metroidvania-esque sections seem to be a lot more involved, or at least than what I played of the game, because I need to finish the first Blasphemous. But more than that, those combat sections, like, Blasphemous, a fine solution to a combat was just, like, jump and dash over the guy, and I'd be really interested to see if they were like, okay, let's limit that part of your toolkit and instead design a combat system that is worth not doing that. Like, if we take away this tool, we have to replace it with something. And then I'd be really interested to see a version of this game that, like, doubles down on both sides of itself and, like, more clearly delineates them.
Or in the way that in, like, the Souls games, you don't have to learn how to parry unless it's like a Sekiro that makes it a requirement for combat, but you get distinct, there are advantages to engaging with those systems. And so I'd be interested to see where Blasphemous falls down, and where it's like, hey, we're going to make core to success engaging with these defensive level systems, or it's like, hey, you can still do the jump and dash, you'll be okay, but you're missing out on X, Y, and Z as a result of not engaging with some of this new stuff. And so that would be, I could see them, because in the trailer, there's still a lot of, like, seem to be jumping and dashing in this one, which is fine. I love to jump and I love to dash, while I fight like a big pixelated demon baby that's vomiting on me, as is often the case. Like, even if you never play these games, I cannot more highly recommend watching their trailers because the art is just astounding. Yeah. I wrote a feature a couple years ago about the game after being really taken by it, and the heart of the feature was that it's a game made in Spain. Like, its script was written in Spanish, but because it was a small team with a limited budget, they had to translate it to English, voice it in English, and it was released with that as the primary language because they were trying to appeal to the broadest possible demographic, like in terms of like what makes the most sense to kind of like get the sales in the right direction. And my feature was about how they were going back, and then because the game was a success, had a budget to go and record the voices in Spanish and like kind of bring the game full circle. And I'm going to do a piece following up on the sequel soon. I haven't sent the questions off, but I can at least say up front, it was like the first thing I asked like the PR person. I was like, hey, I'm sure some people are asking like specifics about gameplay, like what's going on with the defensive stuff. Do they speak Spanish this time when it launches? And they told me yes. Nice. That was like a really important to them that the game better reflected like its cultural origins and because in the piece I really went into like there was a lot lost in like that like translation as is wont to be in those situations. So I'm really stoked that I'll be able to play the game like in Spanish with subtitles like when it comes out later this summer. So hopefully I'll have a little bit more from the developers soon, but I at least wanted to mention that. Otherwise, it was kind of low key, no Silk Song. The journey continues to wonder if that game actually exists anymore. Maybe it was swallowed into a black hole. I don't know.
It's somewhere.
They should take this. I mean, look, it's gonna be so mean to all the other games when it comes out because everything else won't matter. Right. So just take your time. The other one that got I guess they didn't get a release date, but we at least know that like Rift of the Necrodancer, which is the follow-up to.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, Crypt of the Necrodancer, a game that I quite liked, but for some reason just didn't play a ton of. I don't have a good explanation for that because it's exactly the kind of game I would have adored. But this new one, the footage seems to squarely put it into a like rhythm heaven sort of world, which is like different mini games and sort of like design interactions with music that go beyond like the kind of jumping through squares combat system that defined the first one. So that's mostly what happened at the direct. And then also Doug Bowser came out and like started cheering about jail cells. It was a really weird part. Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
A little unnecessary.
I love disciplining and punishing.
They actually put Gary Bowser like in cuffs right on the stream, and it was just really, really uncomfortable.
God, if they could, man,
they would have
do public pillories of people. They would
my God, in a heartbeat, in less than a heartbeat.
That sound the Switch makes, like their little like the like for their transition stuff, like right as the cuffs go on.
Oh, dark. Greg Bowser's
dark.
Greg Bowser standing in front of the camera. I'm sorry, my sovereign body was injured, and I simply must redress this by inflicting a dissymmetry of pain upon this poor man. I have no other option.
Well, that's done.
The body of the sovereign must be restored.
I was gonna very, very quickly just shout out a game that I thought looked really interesting that you can also get on PC. So like you don't have to buy it on the Switch if you want. Called Crime O'Clock. Did you clock that one?
Oh, that did look cool.
It's like a investigation, like mystery puzzle game that plays with time, and it seems really neat. It has a very kind of interesting art style as well, where like it's very limited palette use, and I don't know. It looked cool. I'm curious about following up with that when it comes out in June.
All right. Well, I think with that interview, we're have a pretty meaty show for folks here, so I think we will just call it a week. So if you want more from Waypoint, you can follow us on Twitter at Waypoint. You can follow us on Facebook and YouTube, Waypoint Vice. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Zachney. You can follow Kato at
_Kato_appears.
Patrick, where are you?
I'm over at Patrick Klepek, Rob. Thanks for asking.
Ren, where can interested parties find out more about Renata Price?
Where's cool Renata?
At Ren
It's
or
a private
Ra-
account.
Twitter circles only. Thank you.
You can follow me on Twitter at Ren or Raven. You can find me becoming cool Renata on my girlfriend's stoop after 5 p.m.
You can also check out what we published on waypoint.vice.com. You can read what Ren thought of OCHA in text form. OCHO in text form. And I am definitely going to have to write up a bit more about War Tales. Let me tell you, Ren, did you reach the end of the refugee arc?
No.
Well, you can pick a side.
Oh, I've picked a side.
Yeah, well, you really have to commit. Let me just tell you this.
Right.
You got to break some eggs.
You gotta break some. I mean, I've done some egg breaking already. I killed some people in a forest who. I can't tell if.
How would you feel about killing them in the streets of town?
Well,
Yeah, it's like you hit the end of you reach the end of the quest, and someone's like, you've been so helpful to us, and really made me understand that what we need is not help, but revolution.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know that's what I was saying, but sure, I'll come help.
yeah.
Like,
I'm chill.
I'm like, hey, I found the blacksmith y'all need to build a little craft industry here and establish yourselves. And they were like, that blacksmith. It turns out we don't need a blacksmith. What we need are weapons and revenge. So that is also this game is so much bigger than I thought, Ren. I wandered into an area I went exploring, and I encountered some bears.
Mm-hmm. Did the bears absolutely fucking obliterate you instantaneously?
Well, yes, but also it was more that I couldn't even do anything about them because they all had 900 hit points.
Jesus Christ.
900 hit points. So for context,
Feels
for everyone,
rather out of scale, doesn't it?
What the fuck?
For context for everyone, let me just say the kind of damage numbers that I was doing with my best DPS at level 4. 20. 36. 36 damage was like doing multiple turns. That was a crit with multiple turns of setup with my guy who, with my rogue.
Yeah. I wandered out of Tiltrin. I found this sheltered mountain pass going east. And I was like, cool, I'll see what's over here. And it seemed like a perfectly nice place. And then I went over a mountain, and then I met some bears, and I was like, why were the bears why was the icon for them tinged red? I haven't seen that before. Why is that red? And then I loaded into the battle, and they all had 900 hit points. And I was like, that's just not a scale that I knew this game could even reach.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on. But anyway, very big game. Lots of fun. Continue to enjoy it.
Wait,
Probably
was that-
write something up.
Were those the first bears you'd met, or you'd met bears before?
Oh, I'd met.
Oh, okay.
Well, I thought I met bears, but these were different bears.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. Thanks to Waypoint Plus, we've been able to have a bunch of fun streams lately. How is Darkest Dungeon 2 continuing?
Oh, great. Absolutely amazing. Whoever said that a game was hard, now, did
Nakata,
we?
yeah.
What?
We wiped.
No, I mean,
we wiped
it's
once.
Fine. It was being unfair. It was
one thing, shit.
yeah.
That sounds.
It's a run
Exactly.
game.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
To give you an idea of our current state, I sent Kato a tweet I saw recently that said, a video game is good when you can apply damage over time effects. Poison, burning, things of that nature.
From that nature. Yeah.
And you know what? That is currently
That's
what
where we're
Kato
at.
and I are doing. We made some shit that I think is disgusting. We have made some stuff that when it works, we can basically instantly obliterate any team. It's astounding.
It's great. We're breaking this thing wide open. I'm sure that if we go back in, it'll be smooth sailing through the rest of the game. Obviously,
Love to hear that. And I think Patrick and I are going to close out the week. Maybe as you are listening to this, we will be doing it. We'll be playing some Dead Island 2 multiplayer. For Waypoint Plus listeners, hey, this week we watched Mandy. Next week it'll be on the main feed, but right now you get it ad-free if you were a Waypoint Plus subscriber. If that sounds good, or you just want more Waypoint, you can go to waypointplus.com and subscribe. Not only do you get access to our premium feed, but you're also helping support Waypoint and everything else we do here. Our theme music is by Bowen. The track is Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Learn more at waypoint.zone/BOEN. For now, we are calling time on this week. We will talk to you again next week. Till then, fuck capitalism. Go home.